Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 3 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation T.E.E.T.H. We begin this segment with number 3 exiting a candy store with what else but bags of candy. We also see that this candy store is next to a dentist office. As number 3 is walking back to the treehouse, we get a quick look at her teeth, and they are not a pretty sight, to say the least. Number 3 ends up walking in a circle because she's back in front of the candy store and the dentist office, and then she ends up going down the alley in between the two buildings. It's now nighttime once number 3 enters the alley, and she realizes that she took a wrong turn. But before she can exit the alley, she's ambushed by someone. After the ambush, number 3 discovers that her teeth are now so shiny that they emit light in the darkness. And we see that the one responsible for the ambush is a masked figure who's now standing on the rooftop. The masked figure laughs as he makes his escape by jumping onto the rooftops of the nearby buildings. Number 3 eventually returns to the treehouse, and her teammates are surprised to see that her teeth are now exceptionally shiny, and they mention that her teeth should look more like the respective teeth of number 2, number 4, and number 5. We do get to see the teeth of these particular operatives, and they aren't pretty sights, to say the least. Number 5 figures that they just need to get some more candy, so the Sector V operatives decide to all go together to the candy store. We then see the Sector V operatives walking to the candy store, and number 3 is using her shiny teeth as a substitute for a flashlight as they try to reach their destination. When they get to the dentist office, they're greeted by the dentist, Dr. Sigmund T.E.E.T.H, and he offers the Sector V operatives complimentary checkups. But the Sector V operatives are rather dismissive about his offer. When they reach the candy store, they see that it's closed now, so they have to wait until tomorrow to get some more candy. But then Mr. Jelly, the candy store's owner, actually allows them to enter the candy store now, since he says that the candy store is always open to his best customers. So we see the Kids Next Door operatives, the Sector V operatives of the Kids Next Door to be more specific, gathering up some more candy. Number 2 questions if there's any taffy, but Mr. Jelly, in a rather suspicious manner, says they're all out of it. But in any case, the operatives from Sector V still manage to get quite a bit of candy, and they thank Mr. Jelly and tell him to put it on the Kids Next Door's account. And Mr. Jelly says goodbye to them and also tells them to keep a lookout for the dentist. This inspires number 4 to go up to ramble. Yeah, this inspires number 4 to ramble about what he would do if he ends up crossing paths with the dentist again. And now the screen is showing the other Sector V operatives walking. We don't see number 4 on screen at this point, but we can still hear him talking. But then suddenly number 4 stops talking, but the Sector V operatives, the other Sector V operatives present, I should say, figure number 4 just stopped talking, and they're just grateful for the silence, not bothering to look behind them and just continuing to walk back to the treehouse. Eventually, the four of the 5 Sector V operatives that are still present do return to the treehouse, and they find that number 4 is tied up in the central control room. He also has a giant pair of braces on his teeth now, and there's also a note warning the Sector V operatives to brush after every meal, and it's signed by Knightbrace. Number 5 suspects that Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H is behind this, but Number 1 doesn't want to jump to conclusions just yet and figures that they need to get some more candy. But then he notices that Number 2 and Number 5 are no longer in the central control room. But a door leading out to one of the balconies of the treehouse is open, and when Number 1 walks out to the balcony, he sees Number 2 and Number 5 are now ensnared in floss. Now Number 1 is convinced that Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H is Knightbrace, and he says they need to come up with a plan to get the drop on Knightbrace. The next scene takes us to the alley in between the dentist office and the candy store, and we see the Sector V operatives are hiding, and they placed a dummy of Number 1 out in the open to lure Knightbrace. And yes, this works. Knightbrace ends up appearing, so the Sector V operatives prepare to ambush Knightbrace. After a quick fight, Knightbrace eventually escapes through a window of one of the buildings, and the Sector V operatives follow him through the window, and it turns out to be the dentist office. As the Sector V operatives are looking for Knightbrace, Knightbrace is hiding on the roof of the ceiling, He's hiding on the ceiling of the dentist office, and he's about to ambush Number 1. But the other Sector V operatives see Knightbrace, and they actually use the dental methods that Knightbrace used on them. They use it against Knightbrace. So first, Number 4 ends up hitting Knightbrace's foot with the braces. Number 3 temporarily blinds Knightbrace with her shiny teeth, and Number 2 and Number 5 manage to knock Knightbrace over with the dental floss. The Sector V operatives are still confident that Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H is Knightbrace, but then Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H actually enters the room, so he's not Knightbrace. This confuses the Sector V operatives, and they're surprised to see Knightbrace's true identity when they unmask him. Knightbrace is really Mr. Jelly. Mr. Jelly admits that he always wanted to be a dentist ever since he was a kid, but he ended up getting kicked out of dentist school because he tried to put braces on babies. So his only choice for a job afterwards was his family's candy store, but he eventually snapped after seeing so many kids eating so much candy from the store. So in an effort to restore the kids' teeth from all of the candy that they've eaten from the store, he took up the mantle of Knightbrace. Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H apparently was a colleague was at dentist school around the same time as Knightbrace, or he may have been one of the teachers. In any case, though, Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H is aware of Mr. Jelly wanting to be a dentist, and he tries to tell him that Mr. Jelly is acting like an extremist, even if he's well-intentioned, but Knightbrace refuses to listen to reason, and he ends up turning the dental chair into a weapons machine, and he traps Number 1, and he intends to use a dental paste on Number 1. And Dr. T.E.T.H ended up leaving the room, but he quickly comes back with Taffy, and Knightbrace admits that Taffy is his weakness. So Knightbrace is eating the Taffy, and he gets really excited by the Taffy that the Taffy gets all over the machine, so it ends up stopping the machine. So Number 1 is spared from the dental paste. And Knightbrace is eventually tired out from eating all the Taffy. And Dr. Sigmund T.E.T.H assures the Sector V operatives that the dental administration will try to rehabilitate Knightbrace. He also assures them not to worry about the candy store going out of business because it turns out he has a brother-in-law who'd be willing to run the candy store. Dr. T.E.T.H once again tries to offer them free checkups, but the Sector V operatives laugh off the offer and dismiss it, and that's how we end the segment. So this segment introduces us to Knightbrace, and he's a villain that goes on to appear. He gets some prevalent appearances in future segments and episodes of the series. Usually they're part of. Usually though, his appearances are with a group of other villains. There is one other segment that one could make the argument is another segment where Knightbrace is the central villain or the focus villain of that particular segment. But we'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. And otherwise, though, I think this segment actually is a pretty good example of the early installment weirdness from season 1, but also has hints of what becomes more prevalent in later seasons of the series. To be more specific, I did mention this before, but most people would say the kids next door, or the Sector V operatives in particular, do come off as less heroic in season 1 compared to later seasons of the series, where they definitely are portrayed in a much clearer heroic light. But in season 1, they come off as not quite as heroic in comparison. At least the earlier season 1 episodes, one could argue that they become more heroic by the end of season 1. But yeah, earlier on in season 1's run, the Sector V operatives are portrayed less heroically compared to later seasons. I've seen some viewers go as far as to describe the Sector V operatives as starting off as villain protagonists, although I don't know if I would necessarily describe them as villain protagonists, if only because I think even at their worst, the Sector V operatives never really struck me as particularly villainous. Maybe at worst really bratty, but I don't know if I would necessarily call them villainous, especially because of, I guess, and some might argue, if you do view them as villain protagonists, some might view their earlier conflicts as evil versus evil situations. But again, I myself personally wouldn't describe the Sector V operatives as villain protagonists, or I don't think that necessarily is the best choice of words, even if they do come off as less heroic earlier on in the series run compared to later on. But I think in this segment in particular, the reason why some might see this as an example of their less heroic qualities is they really didn't care about their dental hygiene here. Like, I know that kind of, some viewers found that rather off-putting, and some could definitely understand where Knightbrace was coming from. Like, yeah, Knightbrace was a well-intentioned extremist. I mean, he wanted to encourage dental hygiene, which is good and all, but he was definitely going way too far about it. He definitely was an extremist about it, which even Dr. T.E.T.H pointed out. And that's actually, Dr. T.E.T.H is actually a great example of that point I was making about a sign of what would become more prevalent later on in the series. Because I think part of the reason why some might call the Sector V operatives villain protagonists in the earlier episodes is because it seems a little more black and white about how the kids next door are against adults in general, rather than necessarily malevolent adults. But that becomes later seasons do portray more shades of gray. It's not such a black and white conflict. There's shades of gray that are more prevalent in the later seasons. Like, we do see that there are, besides portraying the kids next door in a more heroic light, or much more heroic light, we do get to see some more adults that are benevolent or reasonable authority figures. And And going with the kids next door being portrayed in a heroic light, some later episodes and segments do portray the kids next door as only really going after villainous adults, not all adults. There is one segment in particular that touches up on that. We'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But yeah, besides showing more adults that are sympathetic or benevolent, we do also get to see some more kid villains besides the delightful children from down the lane. And we do get to see, and teens actually. Teens do end up getting brought up later on in the series as well. But yeah, there is a lot more, there's more shades of gray in the later seasons, showing that kids, teens, and adults all have their share of heroes, villains, anti-heroes, and anti-villains. And Dr. Sigmund T.E.E.T.H here, he actually is portrayed as a reasonable authority figure. At worst, he might have been a little too eager to try and convince the Sector V operatives to get... he may have been a little too eager about the complimentary checkups he was offering to the Sector V operatives, but he really was a fairly reasonable authority figure overall, and he was opposed to Knightbrace's more extreme methods. So, yeah, I guess you could say this segment kind of shows, early installment weirdness, but also hints of what becomes more prevalent in the later seasons of the series. So, it's a pretty interesting segment to me because of that. Otherwise, I do think they made good use of foreshadowing for this particular segment. When the Sector V operatives are trying to figure out who Knightbrace is, when you listen closely to number 4, it's hard to... number 4's voice is kind of muffled because of the braces, but if you listen closely, he's actually saying Mr. Jelly. It seems number 4 actually saw Mr. Jelly without the Knightbrace mask. So that was actually some pretty good foreshadowing for those who actually listened to number 4's muffled dialogue. And the taffy was also foreshadowed well, because when number 2 questioned Mr. Jelly about if there was any taffy, he kind of got really suspicious and insisted that it was gone, and he even tried to avoid calling it taffy, like he was saying that stuff or something like that. So once again, they did do some good foreshadowing there for this particular segment. Otherwise, I think that's about it. So this segment was a pretty good example of both the early installment weirdness of Season 1, but also could be seen as arguably the earliest sign of something that becomes more prevalent later on in the series. The conflict having more shades of gray, showing kids, teens, and adults having their share of good, bad, and morally ambiguous individuals. And like I said, I did like the foreshadowing that they applied in this particular segment. But otherwise, there we go. As of this video, we've now discussed the B segment of episode 3 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.